The uncomfortable atmosphere continued even after those two left. It was thick with the idea that simply thinking about the culprit's identity would be the same as deciding whom to suspect. It had begun to feel like discussion of the case was itself taboo. So no one mentioned the case, at least out loud. However, those thoughts were what filled our minds. All that we couldn't say aloud made our heads feel like they were going to explode. So at least on the outside, the parlor had once again regained its calm mood. Everything was left unsettled. It feels like the rain's gotten a little lighter.
Still pouring down.
Even if it did stop, there's no boat on this island. But it would be nice if the boat came quickly tomorrow. I've had enough of this Western Mansion vacation. Stupid laughter, man. Why does he do that? I wonder what it sounds like in Japanese, though. Like, when you play the game on PS3 with actual Japanese voice acting, what does his laughter sound like? If anyone can send me a YouTube link of that, without any spoilers, that would be cool.
Mom, when will the boat come tomorrow? Normally the boat to take them back would arrive at 3 today. They probably sent us a phone call to say that they would come after the typhoon passed, but unfortunately the phones aren't working. But they aren't children over there. They were told to both drop off and collect our guests, so they will most likely arrive first thing tomorrow morning. Probably about 9, I believe.
It was completely black outside. Okay, bit of an awkward laugh. Imagine a bit higher pitched Okay. Alright. When I looked at the clock, I realized that it was just past 7 o'clock. I was starting to get hungry. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was cooking enthusiastically. She had laid out a variety of dishes, and while they didn't match the level of Goda's artful cooking, at least she wasn't a dick. And they were still quite gorgeous. It was an act of kindness from Kumasawa, who was trying to enliven everyone's low spirits with some food. Kumasawa wasn't nearly as talented as a professional cook like Goda, but she was far from unskilled, and she was not a dick. On the contrary, since she had been brought up in a fishing village, the simple food she created was sometimes highly praised. I'm getting hungry now. Kanon arranged the food Kumasawa had finished, creating on plates under her direction. Kanon also helped in the kitchen sometimes, but since he was rarely placed in that role, he was slightly awkward even though he tried his best. Self-conscious about the fact that he couldn't cleverly arrange the food, Kanon's expression darkened slightly. Oh, don't beat yourself up over that. But Kumasawa smiled as though everything was fine.
It's arranged beautifully. Kanon-kun, aren't you skilled?
If it had been Shannon, Nissan, it would look even more beautiful. Kanon stopped arranging the food for a bit and hung his head. Shannon was the one who always assisted Kumasawa in her cooking. Tonight, Kanon was doing it instead, and as he remembered Shannon's face and her brutal end, he grimaced.
Forget that for now.
Genji spoke kindly to Kanon as he advanced a pawn. Were they playing chess in the background? Okay. Nanjo had escaped from the parlor once the mood had grown sour, and Genji had become his opponent in a game of chess upon Nanjo's request.
Yes, I will forget it for now.
Indeed, that is probably for the best, says somebody I don't know who. Probably Genji. Genji purposefully refrained from facing Kanon as he spoke. He did so because he understood that it might make things tougher on Kanon if he noticed that someone was looking at his eyes. Why? Why? Does he have weird eyes, or doesn't he like being looked in the eyes? Nanjo also understood that, and held back any thoughtless words.
I wonder where Kinzo-san has gone. I hope that he is safe, but I do not know. However, I believe everything has proceeded as the master has hoped and arranged for. To distrust that would exceed my role as furniture in service to the master. Are you scared, Genji-san? I am frightened that something bad will occur again tonight.
Oh, I'm already convinced that something bad will occur, and it's probably going to be some freaking supernatural shit because Battler prayed for that.
I have nothing to be afraid of. I serve the Yoshinomiya family, and that is all.
Nanjo sighed through his nose and made a carefully considered move. Nanjo was very slightly dubious. Could Genji possibly be thinking that he'd be left out of this? He couldn't even imagine what was happening inside this mansion, but he definitely couldn't deny the possibility that Kinzo had devised something. If you liken this island to chess, Kinzo had opened the game, and as a result, 6 pieces had been defeated. Could it be that Genji was calm because he believed he alone was on the outside of the chessboard and therefore safe? Nanjo thought about it. Isn't everyone just a piece on this chessboard, lined up equally without any exceptions? Wasn't even Genji, who had gained more of Kinzo's trust than anyone? No, was confident of his position as Kinzo's only close friend. Just another one of the pieces laid out on the chessboard?
Genji-san, I am truly frightened about tonight. I hope with all my heart that we will still be safe when tomorrow morning comes.
The guest room Eva and Hideyoshi moved into, and just after he says that, the scene changes to Eva and Hideyoshi. I'm still convinced one of them is gonna get fucked. And, I mean, they're husband and wife, so in the literal sense, that might very well happen tonight, but I mean the other kind of fucked. Sorry. The guest room Eva and Hideyoshi moved into had originally been built to house guests before the guest house's construction. So until a few years ago, they had stayed in these they had stayed in these rooms every family conference and were very familiar with them. Okay, somebody posted the link to Battle's Ehehe. I'm gonna open it in the background and listen to it later. Thanks for that. This room was just like a room in a hotel, with a bedroom and a bathroom. So even though they were still shut in, it was far more comfortable than the parlor. Guess it's true you can relax more when you're alone with your family. Maybe it'd be better if everyone else also shut themselves in guest rooms and locked the doors.
Natsune-san said that no one could leave the parlor, throwing her weight around. I'm sure no one will be able to talk back. She's always been treated so coldly, so now that Nissan is dead, she's getting excited about finally having so much power. Seriously, how shameless can she be?
Come now, don't say that. Natsune-san's doing pretty well. No need to jump on her like that. And about that receipt earlier, you went too far.
Come on, if I hadn't said it there wouldn't be another good time to say it.
Yeah, maybe it was better not to say it at all. Maybe there was no good time to say it ever. Eva, sulking cutely and looking at the television, sat alongside Hideyoshi, who was lying on the bed. Oh, I was just making a dirty joke with the whole somebody's getting fucked tonight thing, but man, it seems like it's getting a bit romantic right now. And you know what that means? Those who remain shall tear apart the two who are close. They are getting close right now, aren't they? Man, I don't know. We'll see.
Still, we haven't been alone like this for quite some time.
I don't know who's talking. You're right, come to think of it, both you and I have gone pretty old. Since George was born, everything's gone by in the blink of an eye. Also, this is the copyright strike song. That's how I remember the song now, because every time it plays, it gets the copyright strike on the video. But not the bad kind of copyright strike. I don't have to do anything, nothing really happens. It's just a running gag at this point. I really like this song, by the way. It really has. I wonder if we were too hasty in having a child. Eva's eyes looked like they were staring off into the distance. Yes, she had thought of it as a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Her older brother Klaus had been unable to father a child for quite some time. 6 years passed after his marriage to Natsuhi without any signs of pregnancy, which didn't please Kenzo at all. Eva herself had thought that, since her name would be moved outside the Yoshidomiya register when she got married anyway, it didn't matter whether a successor to the headship was born or not. And then one day, she had a heavenly revelation. Or maybe it was the whisperings of the devil that she had listened to in her greed. If she could give birth to a successor first, wouldn't she be able to remain in the Yoshidomiya register? If things went well, might she have a chance to inherit the Yoshidomiya family herself? At this point, I would think the best course of action is to distance yourself from this family, because it doesn't seem like hanging out with them leads to anything good. When she proposed this to Hideyoshi, he had approved of it instantly. This wasn't because Hideyoshi also had greedy thoughts. For Hideyoshi, who had no close relatives, it was a chance for him to feel once more the long-forgotten thing called family. So when they got married, he hadn't fussed over which last name they were to keep, and had quickly agreed to have his name entered into the Ushiromiya family register. It hadn't been easy to persuade Kinzo, but as his daughter, Ifa knew Kinzo's personality well. So by choosing the time when Kinzo was most dissatisfied with Natsui, that sounds really mean, she was magnificently able to make him accept Hideyoshi as an adopted son-in-law. Looking at Hideyoshi, who had achieved success after starting from nothing, Kinzo might have seen a little bit of himself. He quickly grew to like Hideyoshi and approved his transfer into the Ushiromiya register. George would eventually become the successor to the Ushiromiya family. They had raised him strictly with that purpose in mind. He had been worth their while and had grown into a fabulous young man who wouldn't disappoint no matter where he went. That was why he had not been permitted to fall in love with a servant like Shannon. Oh, come on. So when she learned that Shannon was dead and the engagement was now invalid, though part of her had still been shocked by the gruesome crime, part of her had also been relieved that her dear George wouldn't be stolen by some servant girl. That's cruel.
I have hated Klaus Nissan since long ago. He was so full of himself, always swaggering around, so proud that he would one day become the head. So I wanted to get back at him. Was that just a childish emotion? But in the end, that emotion guided my entire life. If that had been all, then it would have been fine. But because of that emotion, I got you and George involved. I used you.
Eva, don't blame yourself for that. Hideyoshi got up and held Eva's shoulder. She could feel a warm understanding from him. Well, I reached the halfway point in my life long ago. But you know, I have absolutely no regrets about how I've lived my life. Not one. Telling you he's gonna die. I think that since I've been with you, Eva, I've been able to relish an enjoyable life that other men never will. After I lost my relatives in the war, you remind me of what the warmth of family is. So I'm grateful to the Rishudomiya family and think of it as my only one. In this life I've led with you, not a single thing has been wasted. It's really been a fun life up till today.
Thank you, darling.
Or maybe they're making this scene so I think that he's gonna die and then somebody else gets brutally murdered. Eva hung her head, burying her face in Hideyoshi's chest. Probably no one in the parlor could even imagine that this side of Eva existed. I'm the one who should be thanking you. Until today, there hasn't been a single day I've regretted being with you.
Me too. I'm so glad to have you by my side. George is already a fine adult. Even if I don't look out for him, he's a man who could do his job well on his own. I wonder, around New Year's, do you want to go spend some time in the Maldives?
Where's that again? Isn't that Maldiven?
Yes, just us, no one else. In German, I mean.
No way. Aren't you always saying that you're so busy responding to New Year's cards that you don't even sleep?
None of that this New Year's.
Okay, I'm not even sure who's talking at what point. I'm just imagining this to be Eva.
I won't read New Year's cards. I'll just stay quiet and check to see if I've won the New Year's lottery. It should be nice if we won a color TV this year.
No way. I don't want to waste time checking the lottery while in the Maldives.
Then none of that either. How does it sound? Just the two of us taking it easy like when we were newlyweds, just before George was born.
Maybe the Japanese shows who's... Oh. So maybe that's actually... to play Mortal Kombat, yeah. Never gonna go away, fucking Mortal Kombat is gonna show up all the time. I bet Maria is playing it right now. So I think this is actually, yeah, this is actually Hideyoshi talking. Then none of that either. How does it sound? Just the two of us taking it easy like when we were newlyweds just before George was born.
Yes, in that case, fine.
I hear the Maldives are wonderful. South of India, okay. An island with nothing on it. Surrounded by beautiful coral reefs and cottages lined up over the water.
Like when we were newlyweds, you say? Starting when?
As soon as I've finished up some business. I won't know till I ask the travel agency, but probably before New Year's Eve.
No way. Right now? I want to go right now.
I get that's kind of impossible. Eva knacked at his lips in a peevish yet flirtatious manner. Oh, the only sounds that filled the room were the distant voice of the announcer on the news, which Hideyoshi had left on, and the obnoxious pounding of the rain against the window. There was a knock on the door, and Genji-san entered. Oh,
Madam, dinner has been prepared. Will you eat in here again? Yes. Have it brought here. Is Dr. Nanjo still in the kitchen? Yes. He has said he wishes to carefully deliberate over his next move. Do not worry, he is with the other servants. Genji-san's good enough at chess to be grandfather's opponent. I hear he is even better than Dr. Nanjo, right?
that's right. Long ago he played against me, but he must have let me win. Maria, sounds like it'll be time to eat soon. But look at you, you've been watching TV all day long and you still haven't gotten bored.
No, I'm always watching TV, so I'm fine.
Well, that's sad.
Hey, Maria. Maria-chan, show us the TV, kid. Food's coming, so we have to clean up the table.
Earlier we had torn several pages out of Maria's notebook, and there was now a mess where everyone had been drawing together. Jessica began cleaning that up quickly. Still, everyone here really can draw. I'd never guessed.
Genji, ask Iwa-san and Hideyoshi-san whether they'd at least like to have dinner with us. Although, they will probably turn us down.
They're probably busy right now, if you know what I mean.
Certainly. First father and now Iwa-san. It's quite hard to gather everyone to the Yoshiromiya dinner table, that's true.
Natsuhi felt her headache start throbbing again and lightly held her temples. The distance from the kitchen to the parlor wasn't that great, so Genji had gone and come back by himself. But the guest room was a little farther away. Natsuhi had warned him to avoid being alone whenever possible, and just now Nanjo had also admonished him, saying it would be better if he held a little more concern for his safety. Kanon accompanied Genji, and the two of them went to visit Eva and Hideyoshi in their guest room. Oh dear. Genji knocked on the door.
Iwa-sama, Hideyoshi-sama, dinner has been prepared.
He waited a short while for them to come out, but there was no response.
Genji-sama, look at this.
Kanon pointed under the door. Oh shit. What is this? A Western envelope had been inserted under it. Normally when something was inserted this way, it would be interpreted as a message from someone outside to someone in the room. So since this might be a private note meant for Eva and Hideyoshi, it was not something that Kanon and Genji were supposed to take interest in. But this Western envelope was one of Kinzo's, the same kind as the one Maria had taken out last night and surprised everyone with.
There can be no mistake. It is one of the master's envelopes.
Or could it be? Even though this one was one of Kinzo's envelopes, the letter Maria read aloud the previous night hadn't come from Kinzo. Genji continued knocking a little harder and called out in a loud voice.
Iwa-sama, Iwa-sama, it is Genji. Are you there? Please answer, Iwa-sama.
But there was no response from inside. Sometimes when the servants went to call some guests for a meal, the guests would be sleeping so deeply that they wouldn't wake up. In times like that, the servants would stick a letter in the door to show that it was time to come out and leave the guest be. But despite that, Genji beat even harder on the door and called out Eva's name. However, there was no answer. Kanon stuck his ear up to the door, held his breath, and listened for any sounds coming from inside.
I hear something that sounds like the television, but I don't see and sense anyone. The room might be empty.
Genji took out a handkerchief and, carefully not to touch it with his bare hands, gently pulled out the envelope that had been stuck under the door. It was sealed with deep red sealing wax. Without a doubt, the mark on that sealing wax had come from the Yoshiromiya family head's ring. We all know who has that ring now.
Iwa-sama, Iwa-sama, please answer. Are you still in your room?
But there was still no answer. There was a chance that those two were aimlessly walking around the mansion. This was the home Eva had grown up in. There was plenty of reason to think that she had gone out on a casual stroll. Yeah, but is this really the time for anyone to go out on a casual stroll? Genji groped around in his pocket and pulled out the bundle of keys, which contained the key that would open the guest room.
Genji-sama.
Kanon also understood what this meant. They would sometimes unlock the door so they could go in and do things like make the beds, but only after they made sure the guests were out. To unlock the door for any other reason, and especially to do so when there was a chance the guests hadn't given permission and might still be in there, was an action unbecoming of a servant. Yeah, but I think these are kind of different circumstances here, so I don't see a problem. But Genji had decided, if the only problem had been that his knock hadn't received a reply, he wouldn't have gone this far. The envelope under the door was doubtlessly one of Kinzo's, or rather, one of the western envelopes of the Oshidomiya family had. After last night, the sender of this envelope could be someone other than Kinzo. If this letter had been sent by someone else...
Eva-sama, my apologies. Allow me to enter your room.
After giving that final notice, Genji stuck one of the keys from the bundle into the keyhole. There was the sound of the door unlocking, and after slowly turning the knob, he slowly started opening the door. Light seeped through the crack of the door. Were they in the room? Or had they forgotten to turn out the lights? It was the sound of the door chain being pulled tight. The chain had been secured. Oh, the chain couldn't be secured from the outside, so it also proved that they were in the room. We might have our murder that only a witch can do on our hands now? Could that be? The sound of voices on the TV seeped out of the room. The lights, the chain, and the TV. All of these things made it clear they were in the room. But there was no sign of them. I want to check one thing real quick. How many people are left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Maybe 12. 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay, never mind. Genji called to Eva once again, through the crack of the door, but there was no answer.
Genji-sama, what should we do?
As part of their job, the servants were able to unlock almost any lock in the mansion, but they had no way to open the door with a chain. The only way to get by the chain was to cut it. That was certainly not permitted as part of a servant's usual work. A creepy chill had already rushed up their backs. Kanon held his breath again and tried to sense someone through the door, but even so he was not able to sense anyone.
Well, I will call Madam and return. Kanon, cut the chain. Yes.
As Kanon hurried away to get a cutting tool, Genji called him to a stop.
Wait, Kanon. Return to the kitchen and take Kumasawa with you. You must not act alone.
Yes, certainly. It looked like Kanon was wondering why he had to do something so troublesome in the middle of this urgent situation, but Genji had said it out of worriness. He didn't care what happened to himself, but in the worst case scenario, he didn't want anything to happen to Kanon. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was piling food on the serving cart, and Nanjo was waiting for Genji, apparently wanting to show him a move he'd finally thought up that might turn the tables on him. But Genji's appearance immediately told him that something was wrong.
Oh, what has happened, Genji-san? Dr. Nanjo, my apologies, but please allow this match to be suspended for the time being. Kanon, take care of the chain. Kumasawa, stop setting up dinner for now and accompany Kanon. I will go over to Madam. If you would come with me, Dr. Nanjo. Has something happened?
Genji took Nanjo, who still didn't know what was going on, and quickly left the kitchen.
Kumasawa-san, my apologies, but please come with me. What has happened, Kanon-san?
Kumasawa said almost exactly the same thing as Nanjo, unable to take in the situation, and chased after Kanon, who had flown out into the hallway. Taking Kumasawa with him, Kanon went to a storage room and looked through the tools packed in toolboxes and hanging all over the walls, trying to find something that could be used to cut the chain.
What are you looking for? Let me help too.
We're cutting a door chain. Well, where was that large wire cutter?
A door chain? Why would you do something like that?
The chain to Eva-sama and Hideyoshi-sama's room. Even though they should be inside, they didn't answer when we called them. It took Kumasawa some time to figure out how cutting the chain and Eva and Hideyoshi not answering were connected. But she did realize that this was an urgent situation. Thought it was still Kanon talking. That one will probably do the trick. Kanon took down a very large wire cutter that had been hanging on the wall. It was called a cutter, but maybe it'd be easier to understand if we said it was shaped like a large pair of pliers. I see. Kanon remembered once being warned that this dangerous tool could easily cut through one of your fingers. Kanon took that and rushed up the stairs. He already knew instinctively he should fight for every minute, every second to open it quickly, or perhaps it was already...
Please wait, Kanon-san.
Hurry. Kumasawa eventually caught up with him, gasping for breath with both hands on her knees. When Kanon changed his grip on the wire cutters and looked up at the door, he let out in struck speechless. Oh. That wasn't there before, was it? What is this?
What is this?
Kumasawa screamed weakly, her face pallid. That was no surprise, because right there on the door, just like the magic circle that had been drawn on the shutter of the Rose Garden storehouse, there was another eerie shape drawn with a blood-like paint. However, it would be odd to call this one a magic circle. Maybe it's like a magic door? Because unlike what most people would expect, it wasn't a circle with shapes drawn inside it, but a slightly more complicated geometrical shape. However, those strange characters filling in the gaps, which weren't from the alphabet, were the same kind as the ones on that magic circle on the shutter. But the thing that had Kanon struck speechless wasn't how eerie the magic circle was. It was that something like this hadn't been here a short while ago. First he had taken a trip back to the kitchen. After that, he'd gone to the storage room to grab a tool and headed right back. Put those together and it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. How could someone add something this creepy during that period of time? Well, I mean, they could put it on something else. And then, like, push that thing against it. I'm missing the right English words here, but like, if you take, for example, some transparent foil, write it on that, and then like press it against the door, you could perhaps leave an imprint in a few seconds. But more likely it was Beatrice. And as though it had just been drawn, almost like the door itself was bleeding. Several unsettling vertical red lines slowly dripped down, getting longer and longer. Kumasawa was having a fucking heart attack here. Kumasawa's knees gave way and she sank down on the spot. If Kumasawa hadn't done this first, then Kanon surely would have wanted to.
Beatrice-sama. It's the work of Beatrice-sama. How horrid, how horrid.
Kanon gulped, then readied the wire cutter and approached the door. He didn't want to get close to this disturbing magic circle, and he really didn't want to touch the steadily dripping substance that looked like blood. But if he didn't get close, he wouldn't be able to cut the chain. Fighting this cold feeling, he gulped again, and after gathering his courage, he went even closer, putting the wire cutter up against the chain. He then pressed with all of his strength, managing to cut through the chain far more easily than he'd anticipated. The cut chain fell into 2 separate parts, which continued to clang as they swayed back and forth.
Kanon-san, there's an envelope by your feet. And isn't that the master's?
It looked like Kumasawa had also noticed the western envelope at the bottom of the door, and that the sealing wax had been sealed with the head's ring. Kanon hesitated for just a second over whether he should open the letter first or check inside the room, but he eventually decided on fulfilling his original purpose. Kanon pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket. This was so he wouldn't leave fingerprints on the door. Makes sense. If its worst fears were realized, the police would want to investigate this room too. He slowly pushed the door open. He was able to more clearly hear the sound of the television, which had been seeping out faintly this whole time. Eva-sama? Eva was lying face up on the bed. On the bed with her shoes still on. Kumasawa, who had fearfully entered after Kanon and who was hiding behind his back, screamed a short eek again when she saw Eva like that. Eva's shoes had been the first part of her that Kanon had seen, so the oddness of wearing shoes in bed was the first thing to strike him, but when Eva's head shifted into his line of sight, Kanon couldn't help but let out a short scream like Kumasawa. Right in the middle of Eva's forehead, something had been placed? Something was growing there? No. Right into the center of their forehead. Was it an old-fashioned knife? That or some weapon like it was sticking out. Uh-oh. At the base of where it was stuck in, blood dripped down, staining the sheets on the other side bright red. Kumasawa's knees gave way once more and she sank down on the floor. Her mouth kept flapping open and closed, but she couldn't even scream. Eva was dead, with some kind of weapon sticking out of her forehead. Both eyes were open wide, and the image of the person who killed her must have been burned into them. But the only mouth capable of naming that person had been shut for all eternity. Even though her forehead was the last place they wanted to look, they couldn't tear their eyes from it. Right there, the weapon was stuck into Eva's forehead, standing almost perfectly upright. And on the handle was a complicated design that you wouldn't expect to see on an ordinary weapon. That thing could be summed up with the word occult. It was a vulgar object with a design that might have been of some demon.
What about Hideyoshi-sama? Hideyoshi-sama!
Eva was on top of her bed, but the other bed was empty. Where was Hideyoshi? After taking a backwards glance at Kumasawa still on her knees and stupefied, he checked the bathroom just in case. At the moment he opened the door, he was greeted by steam and the sound of the shower. The bathroom was of the same familiar style as most hotel bathrooms. When taking a shower, a waterproof curtain was used to keep water from flying out. That waterproof curtain was half open, and lying tumbled down in the bathtub was Hideyoshi, completely naked with both eyes open and pointing right at Kanon. Just like Eva, a weapon with a demon-like design was stuck into his forehead. Since his head had been under the shower's hot water this whole time, his face wasn't half covered and filthy with the blood like Eva's had been, but the sight of him dead while still taking a shower was tragic enough. Just then they heard Natsuhi's voice coming from the hall. She was probably coming with Genji.
Again with this graffiti? What about this letter? What does that say inside? I don't know, I haven't read it yet. We shouldn't touch it carelessly. The culprit's fingerprints might be left on it. We should hand it over to the police. They went out of their way to leave it here. I'm sure they would have left fingerprints.
Wouldn't have left fingerprints, as Natsuhi said that she picked up the envelope. And before checking its contents, she entered the room herself, where she found Eva, dead.
Eva-san.
Madam, Hideyoshi-sama is here too.
This is truly atrocious.
Kanon, turn off the shower.
Don't let this be any more pitiful than it needs to be.
Yes, ma'am. Kanon gripped his handkerchief and twisted the valve, turning off the shower. In the bathtub, a small jar of body soap had fallen with its cap off. It really looked like he'd been attacked while taking a shower. There was still a small splash of blood clinging to the white bathtub, and the combination of red and white made a horrible contrast.
Dr. Nanjo, I understand. No signs of postmortem lividity. Rigor mortis hasn't begun either. It would seem that an hour or so has passed since they were killed.
An hour? Is that even possible?
But even so, how a weapon with such a short handle could do that to the skull, I cannot imagine.
Nanjo checked their pulse and their pupils, making certain of their death once more. As Kanan watched this businesslike treatment, he thought, couldn't you tell at a glance that they're dead without doing all that? Nanjo thought about removing the weapon, but then decided it would be better to preserve the scene and hand it over to the police, so he left it alone. But a close inspection of the base showed that it didn't have a blade. Huh? In fact, it was more conical than blade-shaped. He noticed that, rather than a knife, it was more like a short-handled spear, something with a shape better suited for thrusting than slicing. Some people might have likened it to a thick ice pick rather than a short spear. At any rate, after looking at the scene, no further words were needed to describe what sort of terrible purpose such newly designed weapons were originally made for, nor was it necessary to explain how they carried out their function. Natsuhi, hoping to escape the repulsive steam filling the bathroom as soon as she could, covered her mouth with a handkerchief and dashed from the room. Just viewing their gruesome bodies for an instant had been enough to burn the image into her eyes. If she looked any longer, that image would surely remain in her vision for all eternity. The rising urge to vomit was exactly the same feeling she'd had that morning at the gardening storehouse. For a while, Natsuhi couldn't help but stand with her back facing the gas room, fighting that sickness in her stomach.
At any rate, we can't let the children, we can't let George conceal this room. Seal this room with all haste. Yes, we mustn't let them see. If George-san saw his parents in this brutal state.
But they could tell that those fiercely racing footsteps in the hallway belonged to George, even before he came dashing into the room. George and the other children had been waiting in the parlor. However, when they saw Genji speak to Natsuhi, when they saw her turn pale and fly out of the parlor, they had felt a sense of foreboding. And when they saw a large group of people gathered around the guest room, they were sure of it.
Father! Mother!
Man, he has the worst day of his life, right? Doesn't he?
Oh, what is this? Another magic circle?
She just doesn't care.
Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi are safe, right? Hey, Karan-kun, what's this all about?
Bettler-sama. Kana didn't have to say anything. George's scream after he ran into the room told them everything they needed to know.
Who did this? I'll kill you! I'll kill you! George, good. Hang in there.
Natsuhi touched George's shoulder with her hand, but he violently shook her off. George fell over beside Eva and buried his face in the bed in front of his mother's face, wailing. Then he pounded on the bed with his fist over and over again.
George Nissan, hang in there. Huh? Bettler?
Bettler-sama. Bettler had his back against the wall of the hallway and was covering his eyes with his right hand and weeping without restraint.
Horrible. It's horrible. He proposed to the girl he loved and lost her the next day.
And on the same day, even his mom and dad were killed. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Isn't that too harsh?
Of course, it's sad whenever anyone dies, no matter who it is. But to Bettler, those left alone by the death of others were far more worthy of pity. Everyone here now had lost someone close to them. George wasn't the only one to be pitied. However, George's pain was far greater than everyone else's.
Bettler, I know everyone dies sooner or later. If you're human, you'll eventually have to fight the sorrow of losing someone close to you. But still, shouldn't that day be far in the future for Aniki? And shouldn't those deaths visit him one at a time? Horrible. It's too horrible. That bastard. Doesn't he have even a speck of human sympathy in him? Bettler, don't cry.
Maria tried to comfort Bettler in a mechanical sounding voice. Bettler violently wiped his tears.
Yeah, damn it. I won't cry anymore. Tears of regret, tears of sadness, I won't shed them again. It's all useless. The witch has got me backed into a corner. I'm always on the defensive. And that's useless, it's all useless. I'll spin the chessboard around. That bastard probably thinks we'll be running scared like sheep until tomorrow before we try anything. But guess what? I'll spin it around. The bastard can't escape this island until tomorrow either. We won't be hiding away, pissing ourselves. That bastard will. I'll expose you, you'll see. By tomorrow. No, screw tomorrow. Tonight. Before tonight's over, I'll be gripping you by the collar.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
At any rate, we'll lock this room and leave everything as it is until the police come. No objections, I take it?
Natsuhi announced it as though she didn't care whether they agreed or not. If anyone had a right to object, it would have been George, but he looked as though he'd shed enough tears. George nodded slightly, still facing away from the others, and when he stood up, everyone else agreed too. Natsuhi still hadn't opened that western envelope of the family head that she'd picked up. But now that they decided to leave this room, she decided to unseal it in the parlor where everyone could watch. As soon as they walked out into the hallway to head back to the parlor, some of them immediately felt something out of place, or maybe sensed something strange. Huh?
Stinks? Did you notice it too, Maria? Seriously, what's that smell? It's awful.
When everyone sniffed the air, they didn't notice a horrible burnt smell drifting through the hallway, one that none of them had smelled until then.
I will go quickly to check the kitchen. I'm sure I turned the flame off.
After noticing a burnt smell, it was natural that Kumasawa, who had just been using the burner in the kitchen, suspected that her own slip-up had caused it. Kumasawa hastily dashed away.
Kanon, go with Kumasawa. Do not let her be alone.
Yes. After nodding at Genji's order, Kanon followed after her. He wasn't running, but as he followed her, he tried to search for the cause of the smell in other directions as well.
Stings. It truly is a stench that makes the nose wrinkle. However, that doesn't mean we can just open a window for ventilation.
Natsuhi was reluctant to open the windows in a situation where self-defense was so important.
Let us run the fan. I do not believe there will be any need to open the windows.
George Aniki, is it okay if I talk to you?
If it's about finding the culprit, then I have no problems.
It seemed that George had managed to climb out of the abyss of sorrow, but now, all that filled his chest now was the quiet flame of hatred towards the culprit who had stolen the lives of the one who he loved and his beloved parents. The chain for this room was set. From what I could tell by looking at it, I'm positive that it couldn't be opened from the outside. In other words, this was a perfect closed room.
That does seem to be the case. In the case of the Rose Garden storehouse, they might have sneaked the shutter's key out of the servant room, or maybe they had a duplicate key. I can imagine many ways they could have done it. But this chain is different. Among generally used locking techniques, a chain is the simplest one to create a closed room with. Only a chain will block everyone coming from the outside as long as it isn't physically broken. So does this mean the culprit couldn't have gone in or out through the door?
That's interesting. Just a few hours ago, I seem to remember everyone making fuss over how to enter a room without using the door. Back then, we were all losing our cool, wondering how grandfather had disappeared from his room. The receipt Aunt Eva stuck in the door on a whim proved that the door had remained sealed, and since Aunt Natsuhi was the only person to enter or exit during that time, she was under suspicion. Aunt Eva proposed a theory about how Aunt Natsuhi might have thrown grandfather out the window, which sounds kind of funny, and left by the door herself. But this door is much simpler. It was sealed from the inside by the door chain. The window had also been locked from the inside, and the bodies had been inside the room. This time it really had been, without exaggeration, a true closed room. Yeah, you just got what you wished for. Kinda your fault, man. That's right. If you include grandfather's disappearance, 3 cases have occurred, and all 3 times the door has been the point of interest. The first was the shutter. There was a key in the servant room, and if we assume someone knew about that, this can't really be called a closed room. The next was the door sealed by the receipt. However, Aunt Natsuhi entered that room, so if grandfather had left through the window or been thrown out, she would have been able to lock the window before escaping. Or, like my theory, grandfather could have hidden until the receipt was gone and left the room later. Basically, this door can be defeated with a handful of desperate tricks. In that sense, you really can't call this one a closed room either. And now we have the door sealed with a door chain. Finally, we have to give up. The window, the door, everything had been locked. It was a perfect closed room. The first hadn't been a closed room because everyone could be suspected. The second hadn't been a closed room because Aunt Natsuhi could be suspected. But this time, no one can be suspected. This was a perfect closed room because the door chain formed a seal that blocked everyone equally well. And I find it highly unlikely that they attacked each other, especially since they were in different rooms. In that case, did the culprit carry out the crime without entering the room? With some method from outside the room? Good point. Even though the chain makes it impossible to open it wide enough for a person to fit through, you can open it a small crack. Did the culprit knock on the door to make them peer out before attacking them? But then why was Hideyoshi in the shower and Eva on the bed? I mean, if he killed them at the door, they would be lying there. Or even if they were at the other... No, they can be on the other end of the room when they open the door. And even if somebody else has a key and opens the door and like throws something through the small crack towards the other side of the room, then they would be lying at the other side of the room and not one in the shower and one on the bed. Unless they were able to walk a few more meters, but like, who in their right mind with something in their head would decide to take a shower? It doesn't really make sense either. So, Wait, am I missing something? Yeah, you are. If Aunt Eva's body had been lying right next to the door, then it might have been possible. Yeah, what I'm saying. But she was on the bed, at the back of the room. And Uncle Hideyoshi was even in the bathroom. Looking from the crack in the door, you couldn't even see them, and you couldn't reach them with your hands either. Damn it, it's all useless. I don't have a clue. Something was tugging softly at my sleeve. It was Maria. Oh, and they're standing in front of Beatrice's portrait.
Satisfied?
I knew it. She's gonna bring up that he wished for this, isn't she? What do you mean, satisfied?
Battler, since you didn't want to suspect any of your relatives, you made a wish saying you wanted the culprit to be Beatrice, right? Well, Beatrice granted that wish. Just as you asked, she did something that was completely impossible for a human to make you believe in the witch. And now you're complaining? How selfish.
Ouch. I tapped Maria, who was laughing unpleasantly, on the head with my fist. Sure, thanks for granting that wish. It just now was to thank you and also to teach you to stop laughing when it's inappropriate. More importantly, tell me. There was another mysterious scribble on the door to Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's room. Was that another magic circle?
That one had a really memorable and characteristic design, so I'd hoped you'd at least know what it was.
Ouch. I don't know, which is why I'm letting you take the credit. Quit whining and explain.
You sure are a violent battler. I won't tell you if you do mean, get it? I'll say it, stop hitting me. That's the first magic circle of the moon.
Oh, first the sun, now the moon? What does it mean? What is this magic circle's effect? What does the Hebrew writing mean?
The words are from the Old Testament, Psalms 107, verse 16. For he has broken gates of brass and cuts through bars of iron. This magic circle has two effects. First, it can open a door regardless of which method has been used to lock it.
That sure is convenient. So you're saying they're trying to make it look like they're a witch. because this closed room has a door that can't be opened without relying on magic. And the other effect,
When you're blocked by unopenable doors in all directions, it opens a door. By using it in a difficult situation, it gives you a solution you hadn't even thought of until then. Generally speaking, you receive the powers of observation and discernment, inspiration and intuition. Beatrice is trying to provoke you since there's no way lowly humans like Bettler could figure out how this door was opened.
wow. Okay, good work, so shut up. Sounds great. I'll accept this challenge from the witch. Maria-chan, things like witches and demons don't exist in this world. Oh, he's telling her, but wasn't he the one who always cheered her up? Someone killed father and mother. I don't know whether that was someone I know or not, but either way, it was definitely a human. It is actually Hebrew right in there. Well, that's cool. I was hoping it was, because so far, I mean, considering how elaborately the plot has been written so far, like they even think about every kind of different theories and all that in very much detail, I would imagine they would also go and actually put actual Hebrew on there. Yeah, but how? How did they reach those two through that crack in the door? It couldn't have been more than 10 centimeters wide.
At any rate, I can hardly stand this stench. What in the world could it be?
Oh, you're right, I completely forgot about the smell. Kanon and Kumasawa, who had gone on ahead, realized the smell was not coming from the kitchen even before they arrived there. That was because they noticed an even thicker wave of stench rising up from the stairs leading to the basement, which they passed on their way to the kitchen. The boiler room.
I wonder if there's something wrong with the boiler again.
What do you mean again? Doesn't sound good. Those stairs led to the underground boiler room. The mansion's boiler was old and in poor condition. Both of them had witnessed problems with the boiler on several occasions, but they had never smelled the boiler belching out a stench like this before.
What was that sound?
The thing they heard from the basement was definitely the sound of a door closing. Uh-oh, maybe it's the culprit. Kumasawa had phrased it as a question, but she already knew it couldn't be anything else. Scent diffusers, yeah. I sometimes wonder... When I played Thief, I always wanted that so I could smell the night when I was out. Sneaking through the night as a thief, that would have been really cool. But there would also be moments where you probably wouldn't want it. Kumasawa was so surprised at that sound that her knees gave way yet again and she cowered. After all, at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiler room. Well, what do you mean no one? What about Kinzo? He's not there. Oh, by the way, I should look at this. Man, we are already not many people. Already down to not so many. Found on the bed of the guest room inside the mansion with a weapon resembling an ice pick sticking out of her forehead. Found in the bathroom of the same guest room that Eva was found in. Like Eva, there was a weapon resembling an ice pick sticking out of his forehead. I already see a kihihi down there, what the hell? You can't see either of them by looking through the gap of the door while the chain is set. You can't see them, so you can't reach them. Hey, how could a human possibly kill them? Kihihi. Or whichever you prefer. But what I was getting at was that he is not currently here, right? They are there. Yeah, they're all there. But he is not. Could be him. Just a few seconds ago, everyone had been crowded together around Eva and Hideyoshi's room. So who caused the sound of a door closing just now?
Kanon-san.
After taking a second to sort out the situation, Kanon ran down towards the basement. Since they had heard the sound of a door closing just now and there was no sign of anyone coming up the stairs, the person who closed the door had to be inside the boiler room now. If the boiler room had been a dead end, Kanon wouldn't have rushed in so hastily, but Kanon was a servant, so he knew. There were two entrances to the boiler room, one that opened to the mansion and one that opened to the courtyard. If he didn't chase them now, they might slip away. Kumasawa reached the same conclusion long after Kanon did. but she couldn't let him go alone. If the thing in the boiler room was the culprit, an opponent who had easily killed 6 adults in the first murder, then no matter how Kanon confronted them, he wouldn't be a match. Well, Kumasawa wouldn't be either, right? Of course, with this argument, even if Kumasawa joined him, it wouldn't change anything. At any rate, after a delay, Kumasawa decided that she mustn't let Kanon go alone, and she rushed down the stairs. At that time, Kanon was already in the boiler room. The boiler room's characteristic damp heat tormented him. It had always been an unpleasantly smelly and hot place, and on top of that, the room was full of that horrible stench, which made Kanon feel like he was going to be sick. There was no doubt that this room was the source. In that case, Kanon should have been searching for where the smell was coming from. However, Kanon kept gazing straight forward as he grabbed the hatchet from a tool shelf just off to the side of the door. Wow, he's taking a hatchet now. He hadn't stretched out his hand because he'd wanted a hatchet. He had wanted to grab a weapon, any weapon. Why? Kanon gazed into the darkness where the naked light bulb couldn't pierce. Then he answered. In roulette, you bet on a number of the... In roulette, you bet on a number or the colors red or black, vying for a payoff. However, low-risk bets, like black and red, only offer a similarly low payoff. The words coming from Kanon's mouth were swallowed up by the darkness. That darkness suddenly started to swirl, glittering. Huh? Oh shit. It was such a fantastical scene. Golden sparkling butterflies that hid in the shadows all over the boiler room flapped their wings, twinkling beautifully, and gathered in the darkness, disappearing. That's a very creepy sound, by the way. Kanon continued speaking, directing his words at the darkness as it swallowed the butterflies up. But as the butterflies gathered in the darkness, they probably, now they would certainly laugh. But Kanon continued to speak without faltering in the slightest. However, if you bet on something with a lower probability, your payoff increases proportional to the risk. The master called succeeding despite an astronomical risk a miracle, and called the astronomical payoff gained as a result magic. I have no interest in what kind of magic you and the master were seeking when you spun that roulette, but you forgot something. You forgot that in roulette, there's a pocket that's neither black nor red. Roulette has a special pocket called zero, which means that the house takes everything in certain variants of the game. This means that all of the coins bet on the table will be swept up, just as though everyone has forfeit. I set my heart on just one thing. I decided that if Shannon were to be killed and I was left alive, I would sacrifice this life of mine and bring this roulette of yours to ruin. This isn't one of the master's rules, and it certainly isn't one of yours. I made this rule myself. I'm not furniture anymore. I'm the zero on your roulette. That's a cool episode name, by the way. Kanon's face twisted with humiliation. It was clear that his defiance against his own weaknesses was being ridiculed somehow. Kanon's brow creased even further, and a fierce expression that he'd never shown to anyone appeared on his face. The hand grasping the hatchet was shaking. His sweat became drops, which slid downward. It was clear that the emotion causing Kanon's hand to shake wasn't just anger. However, Kanon suppressed that emotion. I won't let your words lead me astray again. This is where the demon's roulette ends. Wait another 1,000 years in hell for your next summoner, Beatrice. When Kanon raised the hatchet and tried to dive into the darkness definitely sneered. It sneered at that courage as if it were vulgar, lazy, futile, and meaningless. That sounds very creepy. What the hell?